let's kick off here. So I'm Dr. Pamela Park. You can find me on Twitter if you want. But a little bit about me before we begin. So I'm based in Silicon Valley, as we've talked about, right down the street from Google. I teach at the University of California, Berkeley. And I also advise startup founders and investors. So all of the tech founders and startups that are here in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of them, and a number of them have big questions about leadership. So I advise them. And so in these roles, I think a lot about leadership and a lot about the future. So what's more important, though, than what I do is why I do it. So our world has a lot of tough challenges. You've seen them: climate change, global pandemic, cybersecurity. These problems are complicated, they're global, they go across different countries, they involve government, business, all sorts of sectors of society, and they cross different areas of study: math, physics, English, storytelling. It'll take lots of creative thinking to solve these problems. You may also need some new technology. That's why I'm here in Silicon Valley. But I think most of all, the future will need a new kind of leader. So let's start with a case study, little one. What happened this weekend in space exploration? Anyone? Mac, Lex, Milo?
About what?
In space exploration, what do you see here that may have happened this week?
A rocket going into space and making a lot of pollution.
There's a rocket. There's a fair amount of dust that's being kicked up here. What else? Lex or Milo?
It's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. So did any of you see perhaps an event this weekend?
Yes.
Yeah. What happened?
It took off.
It took off. That's right. So this is the SpaceX rocket that took off this weekend. It was the first private company to launch humans into space. And what the amazing thing about this was really that they brought down costs dramatically. So before, NASA used to put astronauts into space, and it used to be really expensive. Like, if I can compare it to a school bus ride, it'd be like if every time you took the bus to school, they threw away the school bus. It'd be a really expensive ride to school, right? But what SpaceX did was they created a reusable rocket so that they can send astronauts into space and then bring them back. Okay. Does anyone recognize this person here?
Bill Gates?
Close.
No.
He's an entrepreneur like Bill Gates. He builds rockets, sometimes builds cars. Does Elon Musk ring any bells? So
Yes.
Elon Musk is the head of SpaceX, which is a rocket company. But years ago, when he first started, it was in the early 2000s, he knew very little about rockets. He knew very little about Mars or even space technology. But he had three things. He had a vision of sending a rocket to Mars to save humanity and create kind of an interplanetary environment for humans to thrive in. Second thing is he had a hunger to learn. He got books on rocketry, on propulsion, on all sorts of rocket science to really sit down and learn it. And the third thing he had a cell phone. So he made some calls. He made cold calls. He called scientists. He called people in the rocket industry. And he asked them questions. And one question he asked them was, where can I buy rockets? Someone suggested Russia. So he hopped on a plane and he headed to Russia. He went to the former Soviet Union, and asked them, hey, how much for your rockets? And they gave him an astronomical sum, a really, really high number. He said, 21 million for one rocket? A used rocket? He said, forget that. I've been studying, I've done the math, I'm going to build my own rocket at a fraction of the cost. So this was the beginning of the journey that culminated this weekend in the SpaceX launch. So this is Elon Musk this weekend, celebrating the historic space launch. And so enabled this remarkable feat was leadership, and specifically what I call North Star leadership. So let's start from the beginning. What is leadership? You've probably heard of it. A lot of people talk about it. In fact, if you Google it, there are 1.5 billion search results for a definition of leadership. That's a lot. So a lot of different experts have different opinions. Leaders have different opinions. It's a little bit like your elephant lesson on relativity that you heard during your mental models lesson. People may be describing one wheel, one seat, one handlebar, but they may not be describing the entire thing. The definition I'll use today is leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. There are many other definitions, but that's the one that we'll stick with today. The important thing to remember, though, is leadership is a system, kind of like a bike. Leaders need the group of people, and the group of people need the leaders in order for the system of leadership to work. Without one or the other, hard to get anywhere. Okay? All right. So in my research, I researched at Harvard Business School. I examined leadership and found two kinds of leaders, Gold Star leaders and North Star leaders. So I'll describe both. Gold Star leader is a pretty traditional leader. You may have seen some of these leaders on TV, the CEOs of large Canadian banks and American multinationals. So the people we have pictured here right now, on the left is Eric Schmidt, who is the former CEO of Google. In the middle is a man named Victor Dodig. He is the CEO of CIBC up there in Canada. And the one on the right is Mary Barra. She is the CEO of GM, General Motors. And so what characterizes these types of leaders are that they're great at running businesses. They're great at working with people. They've got long track records of success. And a lot of them worked really hard over a number of years to get to the top. They performed well. They got gold stars for their excellent work. That's why I call them gold star leaders. And they climbed up to the next level by climbing up a ladder. In contrast, though, there's a different type of leader. When it comes to complex problems and finding solutions to complex problems, this is where North Star leaders come in. Here's a great example of a North Star leader. She tackles the complex problem of climate change. Are any of you familiar with who this might be?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, who's that?
Really?
You can describe her too.
Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
That's right. Exactly, Greta Thunberg. How old is Greta, roughly? Is she 70 years old?
Nope, I think she's 17.
She's 17, yeah. And so she first started on her quest on climate change when she was 15, roughly, really standing out and speaking out. And so when you think about it, she's very different from a Gold Star leader. She hasn't spent years climbing to the top. She's only focused on one issue. She's a teenager. How did she become a leader? She focused on one problem, And that's what characterizes North Star leaders. I call them North Star because, like the North Star, it's fixed in one point on the sky, and we revolve around it. So her North Star issue was climate change. And she really sought to drive a deep impact and drive change by solving that specific problem. So she oriented around this North Star issue. She gained expertise, like Elon, learning from all angles of the problem. And she rose to leadership by building community, building a movement around the issue. Why I like this particular leadership is it's good for the future, but not only that, for you all, it doesn't require years and years and years of experience. You can start right now being a leader, like she did. One other example that I have for you is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was an early stage North Star leader. He failed, he had early setbacks and defeats, but he was always learning. And through that learning, it helped him discover new ways of doing things at Apple. So how did they do it? One thing about North Star leaders is that they had very particular tools to enable them to rise to leadership. They focused on a specific problem that they wanted to solve. But they used these 3 tools. The first is cross-boundary learning. That means that they looked at things from many angles. They were able to challenge convention and really break through blind spots that way. So remember Elon Musk? So people thought he was crazy to build his own rocket, but he had read the books, he had done the math, and he realized that it could be done. The second is vision. Really being able to see the solution that was unique, that was creative, and that was innovative. And finally, and most importantly, was storytelling. This was their most important tool. The reason why is, if you remember that bicycle, you need to convince an audience as a leader to trust you and take a big leap into something that's not yet formed. As a leader, you need both wheels of the bicycle. You both need leaders and followers to make it work, to make the entire system of leadership work. And that's why storytelling is so incredibly important. I heard you all love to read and you love to code. I think those are great skills to take forward into the future. So the North Star leaders really rally people around a big idea. They're movement leaders. Gold Star leaders can point to their track record of excellence, their years of experience, the things that they've done. But Elon Musk had no experience in the rocket industry before he started SpaceX. He learned everything. And Greta, she didn't point to her 14 years of being a kid and say, oh, I should be a leader because of those 14 years of experience when she turned 15. Both of them were driven by a problem in the world and learned enough to figure out a solution, had a vision of that solution, and rallied enough people around an idea. That's why Steve Jobs believed in storytelling. He said the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is to come. Storytelling, in other words, connects us to the future. So, I leave you with one question. What's your story? Your future and the future of leadership is in your hands. You create it. What is your story going to be? I can't wait to see what big problems you solve. All right. Thank you. Any questions?
Is the university,
Mm-hmm.
is it Berkeley?
It is Berkeley. It's got a really well-known College of Engineering. That's
then
why
it has 4 stars.
People like coming to campus. It's a well-known place. Any other questions? Milo or Lex? Anyone else? Happy to also talk about Google down the street.
Yes.
Do you find leadership
You pretty
difficult?
much covered all of my questions, but
Yes. But tell me more about what you mean by that question.
Like, do you find it hard to make important decisions that
Yes.
lead people? Do you find it too stressful?
So there's a lot of there are a lot of issues that leaders have to deal with, and sometimes they have to grapple with all sorts of problems, especially as their organizations get bigger. What's important versus what is urgent. Their schedules get very busy, and it gets lonelier at the top because you end up having fewer people to talk to sometimes. And so, yes, leadership can sometimes be stressful, but it's also a great power and a great responsibility to bring people through and help them with the change towards the future. Good question. Any other questions?
no, you covered all of my questions, but can you talk about Google down the street?
Of course, happy to. So what do you want to know?
Just facts, like how many people work there, how big is it?
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly how many people work there. I think you could probably find that on Google, but I'd estimate, it's thousands of people who work there. And what's interesting about Google is that they take up an entire section of the town of Mountain View. They have a big headquarters, which you can actually see in one of the movies on Google. But they also have a number of other buildings all around on their campus, and people walk around campus. They take bikes around the campus, not now, of course, but before. And the other neat thing about Google is that they have these really big cafeterias with lots of free food. And so their employees are very well fed and happy. Those are some of the key things that I've Menlo Park. Are all product, the next big solution to big problems in the world.
Pamela, I have a question.
Yeah.
What might be a good way to start practicing leadership, like for these guys, maybe like around the community, or just throughout their daily lives?
Yeah. So one great way is actually practicing that storytelling. And by storytelling, there are a lot of great resources out there, but I find that TED Talks or symposium talks that have been done by kids are a really great place to start. I've worked with schools related to some of these tech companies, and this is one thing that they encourage their students to do. My own students at Berkeley, their final exam, for example, is that they have to get up and do a TED Talk of their own in front of a live audience. So being able to practice how to communicate an idea and move an audience to action is something that anyone can do at any age. And it's something I really encourage you guys to try out.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much. This was
No
excellent.
problem.
Super, super cool.
Well, I'm so glad to meet you all, and feel free to look me up when you come to Berkeley or Silicon Valley. Love to show you around. I can show you all those Google bikes we talked about.